The blizzard hit without warning, turning the afternoon sky black as midnight, and Willa Thorne knew she was going to die alone on this God-forsaken mountain trail. She had been traveling from Rapid City to White River, South Dakota, a journey that should have taken 2 days on horseback, but the weather had other plans. Her mare had thrown her 3 miles back when the first clap of thunder rolled across the sky, and Willa had been walking ever since, her carpetbag clutched against her chest, her thin traveling coat doing nothing against the wind that cut through her like a knife. She was only 22 years old, a schoolteacher coming to take a position in White River's newly built schoolhouse, and now she would never see that little building or meet the children who needed her. The snow was falling so thick she could barely see her own hands in front of her face. Her fingers had stopped hurting about an hour ago, which she knew meant something terrible. She had read about frostbite in a medical journal once, back when she lived in Boston with her aunt, and she remembered the words vividly. First pain, then numbness, then death. Her feet were blocks of ice inside her leather boots, and each step felt like walking on broken glass. The fear had settled deep in her bones now, a cold terror that matched the temperature around her. She stumbled and fell to her knees in a snowdrift. The white powder came up to her waist, and she realized with a shock of pure horror that she could not get up. Her legs would not obey her anymore. She tried to push herself up with her arms, but they were trembling so badly she could not get any leverage. The wind howled around her like a living thing, hungry and cruel, and Willa felt tears freeze on her cheeks. This was it. This was how it ended. Not in a warm bed surrounded by loved ones, not after a long life of teaching children and making a difference in the world, but alone in a snowstorm in South Dakota, frozen to death like some kind of awful cautionary tale. She thought of her mother, dead these 5 years from consumption. She thought of her father, killed in the war when she was just a child. She thought of her aunt in Boston who had raised her, who had scraped together enough money to send her west for this opportunity. What would Aunt Margaret think when news reached her that Willa had died before even reaching her destination? The cold was making her drowsy now. She had read about that too. The body shutting down, conserving what little heat remained. She wanted to fight it, wanted to stay awake, but her eyelids were so heavy. Maybe if she just rested for a moment, just closed her eyes for a few seconds, she did not hear the horse approaching. She did not hear the man's voice calling out. She was sinking into darkness, a strange warmth spreading through her limbs that she dimly recognized as the beginning of the end. But then hands were on her, strong hands lifting her out of the snow, and a voice was speaking urgently in her ear. "I got you. I got you, miss. Stay with me now." She forced her eyes open and saw a face through the swirling snow. A man's face, young and weathered by sun and wind, with blue eyes that looked almost gray in the storm light. He was wearing a heavy sheepskin coat and a wide-brimmed hat covered in snow, and he was lifting her like she weighed nothing at all. "Can you hear me?" His voice was deep, with a slight drawl that marked him as a local. "You need to stay awake. Do not fall asleep on me." She tried to speak, but her lips would not move properly. A small sound came out, barely more than a whimper. The man cursed under his breath and carried her to a large bay horse that stood nearby, its head lowered against the wind. With impressive strength, he lifted her onto the saddle and then swung up behind her, wrapping one arm around her waist to hold her steady. "There's a line shack about a mile from here," he said, his mouth close to her ear so she could hear him over the storm. "We will make it. You just hold on." She did not have the strength to hold on to anything, but it did not matter because his arm was an iron band around her middle, keeping her upright and secure. She sagged against his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him even through their layers of clothing. The horse began moving, and she felt the rhythm of its gait, steady and sure despite the terrible conditions. Time became strange. She drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of the cold, the movement of the horse, and the warm presence of the man holding her. Once she felt herself slipping sideways, and his arm tightened immediately, pulling her back against him. "Stay with me," he said again, and there was something in his voice that made her want to obey, some quality of command mixed with genuine concern. "We are almost there, just a little further." She did not know how he could tell where they were going. Everything looked the same to her, just endless white and wind and cold. But he seemed to know, guiding his horse with confidence through the blizzard. And then, miraculously, a dark shape emerged from the snow. A small cabin, rough-hewn logs chinked with mud, a stone chimney rising from one end. The man dismounted and lifted her down, then half-carried, half-dragged her to the door. He kicked it open and brought her inside, out of the wind at last. The cabin was dark and almost as cold as outside, but at least the wind could not reach them here. He laid her down on a narrow bunk against one wall and immediately went to work. She watched through heavy-lidded eyes as he moved around the small space with practiced efficiency. He lit a lantern that hung from a hook on the wall, filling the cabin with golden light. Then he went to the fireplace and began building a fire, working quickly, his movements sure and confident. Within minutes, flames were crackling in the hearth, and blessed warmth began to seep into the room. He came back to her and knelt beside the bunk. "I need to get you out of these wet clothes," he said, his eyes meeting hers directly. "You will die if we do not get you warm. Do you understand?" She managed a tiny nod. She was beyond modesty now, beyond caring about propriety. She just wanted to stop being cold. His hands were gentle as he removed her coat, her dress, her soaked petticoats and stockings. He wrapped her in rough wool blankets from a chest in the corner, pile after pile of them, until she was cocooned in warmth. Then he went back outside, and she heard him dealing with the horse, bringing it around to what must be a lean-to attached to the back of the cabin. When he came back in, brushing snow from his shoulders, he shrugged out of his own wet coat and hung it on a peg by the door. Underneath, he wore a flannel shirt and denim trousers, and she could see that he was lean and strong, built like someone who spent his life working outdoors. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with light brown hair that was wet from melted snow and that angular face that spoke of long days in the sun. He pulled a stool over beside her bunk and sat down, studying her face with concern. "How are your fingers and toes? Can you feel them?" She tried to wiggle them experimentally under the blankets. Pain shot through her extremities, sharp and burning, and she gasped. Tears sprang to her eyes. "Good," he said, and there was relief in his voice. "Pain is good. It means you still have blood flow. If they were numb and white, that would be bad. But we are not out of the woods yet. You need to warm up slowly. Too fast and you could go into shock." "Who are you?" she managed to whisper. Her voice sounded strange, hoarse, and weak. "Name is Fletcher Lawson," he said. "I run cattle for the Double Bar Ranch about 10 miles north of here. I was out checking on some strays when the storm hit. Lucky I found you when I did. Another hour and you would have been past saving." "Willa Thorne," she said. "I was going to White River, to teach school." "Well, Miss Thorne, you are not going anywhere for a while. This storm is going to last at least through tomorrow, maybe longer. But you are safe here. I will keep you warm and fed until it passes." She believed him. There was something solid and trustworthy about Fletcher Lawson. Something that made her feel safe despite the fact that she was alone in a remote cabin with a strange man. Maybe it was the direct way he looked at her, or the competent way he had handled the emergency, or simply the fact that he had saved her life. Whatever it was, she felt herself relaxing slightly, the terrible fear that had gripped her finally beginning to loosen. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved my life. Any decent person would have done the same." He stood up and went to a cupboard on the far wall. "There is some food here. Beans, coffee, some jerky. Nothing fancy, but it will keep us going. First thing, though, I need to get some hot liquid into you. Warm you up from the inside." He put a pot of snow on to melt over the fire, then added coffee grounds once the water boiled. The smell filled the cabin, rich and wonderful. While the coffee brewed, he opened a can of beans and set them to heating in a small pan. Willa watched him work, feeling grateful and overwhelmed and still more than a little frightened, not of him but of how close she had come to death. "I thought I was going to die," she said quietly. "I fell in the snow and I could not get up. I was so cold. And then I felt warm, which I knew was bad, but I could not stop myself from wanting to sleep." Fletcher glanced at her, his expression serious. "You were minutes away from freezing to death when I found you. I have seen it before, out on the range. Men who get caught in storms like this. Some of them make it, some do not. You are lucky you are alive, Miss Thorne." "I know." She pulled the blankets tighter around herself, shivering despite the growing warmth in the cabin. "My horse threw me. I have been walking for hours. In this weather," he shook his head. "That was brave and foolish at the same time. You should have looked for shelter immediately." "I did not know where to find any. I just kept walking, hoping I would come across something." "Well, you were heading in the right direction at least." "This lined shack is used by our ranch hands during roundup and when we are moving cattle. It is not much, but it is sturdy and well stocked. We should be comfortable enough until the storm blows over." He poured coffee into a tin cup and brought it to her, then helped her sit up enough to drink. Her hands were shaking too badly to hold the cup herself, so he held it to her lips, tilting it carefully. The coffee was hot and strong and bitter, and it was the best thing she had ever tasted. She felt the warmth of it spreading through her chest and stomach, chasing away some of the bone-deep cold. "Slowly," Fletcher cautioned when she tried to drink too fast. "Small sips. We do not want you getting sick." She obeyed, taking tiny sips while he held the cup steady. When it was half empty, he set it aside and brought her a plate of beans. She managed to hold the spoon herself this time, though her hand trembled with every movement. The beans were plain but hot, and she ate them gratefully. Fletcher fixed his own plate and sat on the stool again, eating in comfortable silence. The fire crackled and popped, and outside the wind howled, but inside the cabin it was warm and safe. Willa finished her beans and accepted another half cup of coffee, and with food and warmth in her belly, she finally felt like she might actually survive. "How did you see me?" she asked. "In all that snow, how did you even know I was there?" "Almost did not," he admitted. "I was following the trail back to this shack when my horse spooked a little, tossed his head. I looked where he was looking and saw something dark in the snow. At first I thought it was a rock or maybe a dead animal. Then I got closer and saw it was a person. Your dress was dark blue, which probably saved your life. If you had been wearing all white, I might have ridden right past." A shiver went through her that had nothing to do with the cold. "I was wearing black yesterday," she said, "for traveling. But it got muddy when my horse threw me, so I changed into the blue dress this morning. If I had not done that—" "Do not think about it," Fletcher said firmly. "You did change and I did see you and you are alive. That is what matters." She nodded, but the realization of how close she had come, how many tiny decisions and chances had aligned to save her life, left her feeling shaken. If she had worn a different dress, if Fletcher had taken a different trail, if his horse had not spooked at just the right moment, she would be dead now. Already buried under snow, her body not to be found until spring. "You should rest," Fletcher said, standing up and taking their empty plates. Your body has been through a trauma. Sleep will help. What about you? Where will you sleep? I will make a bedroll by the fire. I have slept in worse places, believe me. He rinsed the plates with water from a bucket and set them aside to dry. You take the bunk. You need it more than I do. She wanted to argue, to insist that they share somehow, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a heavy weight. Her eyelids drooped, and she could barely keep them open. The warmth of the fire, the food in her belly, and the safety of the cabin all combined to make her feel suddenly, overwhelmingly tired. "Thank you," she murmured again, already half asleep. "Thank you, Fletcher." She did not hear his response. She was already sinking into deep, dreamless sleep, her body finally able to rest now that the danger had passed. When Willa woke, the cabin was filled with gray morning light filtering through the small window. The fire had burned down to embers, and she could hear the steady breathing of someone sleeping nearby. She turned her head carefully and saw Fletcher lying on a bedroll near the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket, his hat pulled down over his eyes. The storm was still raging outside. She could hear the wind battering at the walls and the hiss of snow against the window. They were not going anywhere today. She sat up slowly, testing her body. Her fingers and toes still ached, but the pain was duller now, more of a throb than the sharp burning of yesterday. She could move everything, which seemed like a good sign. The blankets fell away from her shoulders, and she realized with a start that she was still wearing only her undergarments. Her dress and other clothes were hanging on pegs near the fire, drying. Fletcher stirred and sat up, pushing his hat back. His hair was tousled from sleep, and there was a crease on his cheek from the bedroll. He looked younger in the morning light, less weathered and worn. "Morning," he said, his voice rough. "How are you feeling?" "Better," she said honestly. "Sore and achy, but better." "Good." He stood and stretched, then went to the fireplace and began building up the fire again. "I will step outside and give you some privacy to dress. Your clothes should be dry enough by now." He pulled on his coat and hat and went out into the storm, closing the door firmly behind him. Willa moved quickly, gathering her clothes and dressing as fast as her sore fingers would allow. Her dress was wrinkled and stiff from drying by the fire, but it was warm and dry, which was all that mattered. She was just fastening the last button when Fletcher knocked on the door. "Are you decent?" he called. "Yes, come in." He entered in a swirl of snow and wind, his arms full of firewood. He must have retrieved it from a stack outside. He dumped it beside the fireplace and brushed snow from his shoulders, then hung his coat back on the peg. "Storm shows no sign of letting up," he said. "We will be here at least another day, maybe 2 days." Alone in a cabin with a man she did not know. The impropriety of it should have scandalized her, but Willa found she could not bring herself to care. Fletcher had saved her life, and he had been nothing but respectful and kind. Besides, what choice did they have? The storm would kill them if they tried to leave. "I should write a letter," she said. "To the school board in White River. They will be expecting me, and when I do not arrive, they will worry." "No way to send a letter in this weather," Fletcher pointed out. "But once the storm clears, I will ride with you to White River and you can explain what happened. They will understand. Weather like this, everyone knows the dangers." "Will you tell me about White River?" she asked. "I have never been there. I came all the way from Boston, and all I know about the town is what was in the letters from the school board." Fletcher set about making coffee and heating up more beans for breakfast. As he worked, he talked, and Willa listened, grateful for the distraction from their strange situation. "White River is a decent town," he said. "Growing fast. Got a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, a doctor's office. The schoolhouse was just built last year. Before that, the teacher held classes in the church basement. About 200 people living there now, give or take." Mostly ranchers and farmers, a few businessmen. It is rough around the edges, but the people are good. Do you go there often? Every few weeks for supplies and such. The ranch where I work, the Double Bar, is about halfway between White River and Rapid City. We run about 500 head of cattle, bring them to market in the fall. He poured coffee and handed her a cup. It is hard work, but honest. I have been there 3 years now. Where are you from originally? Texas. A slight smile crossed his face. You can probably tell from the way I talk. I came up here after the war looking for work. A lot of us did. Texas was in bad shape after the fighting and there were more men than jobs, so I headed north and ended up here. Willa did some quick math in her head. The war had ended in 1865, 17 years ago. If Fletcher had fought in it, he must have been very young at the time, just a boy, really. How old were you? She asked gently. When you enlisted? 15. His expression grew distant. Lied about my age like a lot of boys did. Thought it was going to be glorious and exciting. Learned real quick that war is neither of those things. I am sorry, he shrugged. It was a long time ago. I survived it, which is more than a lot of men can say, and it taught me some useful skills. How to ride hard, how to shoot straight, how to keep going when things get tough. Those things serve me well out here. They ate breakfast in companionable silence, and then Fletcher taught her how to play cards using a worn deck he found in one of the cupboards. They played for matchsticks, and Willa found herself laughing for the first time in days as Fletcher told her stories about life on the ranch and the various mishaps and adventures he had experienced. There was this one time, he said, grinning, when we were moving a herd across the river and one of the young steers got spooked and jumped right into the water. Well, the whole herd followed, as cattle do, and before we knew it we had 500 head of cattle swimming in circles in the middle of the river, mooing their heads off. Took us 4 hours to get them all out and on their way again. What spooked the steer? A butterfly. Fletcher shook his head, his eyes dancing with amusement. I swear to you, a tiny yellow butterfly landed on its nose and the steer lost its mind. That is cattle for you. They can be calm as can be 1 minute and completely panicked the next. Willa laughed, imagining the scene. That must have been quite a sight. It was something, all right. The boss was not too happy with us, but what could we do? You cannot control a butterfly. As the day wore on, Willa found herself relaxing in Fletcher's company. He was easy to talk to, with a dry sense of humor and a knack for storytelling. He asked her about Boston, about her life before coming west, and he listened with genuine interest as she told him about growing up with her aunt, about her love of teaching, about her dreams of making a difference in children's lives. My mother was a teacher, she explained, before she got sick. She used to tell me that education was the most important gift you could give someone because it could never be taken away. I always wanted to follow in her footsteps. She would be proud of you, Fletcher said quietly. Coming all this way to teach, that takes courage or foolishness. I nearly died before I even got there. Courage and foolishness often look the same from the outside. The difference is in how things turn out. He smiled at her. In your case, I would say courage. By evening, the storm had intensified rather than diminished. The wind screamed around the cabin and snow piled up against the walls. Fletcher went out twice to check on his horse and to bring in more firewood, coming back each time coated in white and shivering. It is getting worse out there, he said after the second trip. I have never seen a storm like this, not in all my years in South Dakota. We might be here longer than I thought. Will your ranch wonder where you are? They know I can take care of myself, and they know about this lined shack. When the storm clears, if I am not back, they will send someone to check. But that could be days from now. He looked at her seriously. Will you be all right with that? being here with me for an extended time. You saved my life, Fletcher. I trust you." Something in his expression softened. "Thank you for that. I know this is not exactly proper, us being here alone, but I give you my word as a gentleman that you are safe with me." "I know," Willa said, and she meant it. That night, as they settled into sleep, Willa found her thoughts drifting in unexpected directions. She kept remembering the feeling of Fletcher's arm around her waist as he held her on his horse, the solid warmth of his chest against her back, the way his hands had been gentle as he wrapped her in blankets, the concern in his eyes when he looked at her. She barely knew him, and yet she felt drawn to him in a way that both thrilled and frightened her. He was handsome, certainly, with those blue-gray eyes and strong features. But it was more than that. It was his kindness, his competence, the way he made her feel safe and cared for. In Boston, she had been courted by several young men, but none of them had made her feel the way Fletcher did with just a smile or a gentle word. "Stop it," she told herself firmly. "You are being ridiculous. He is just being kind because you nearly died. Once you get to White River, you will probably never see him again." But the thought of never seeing Fletcher again made her chest ache in a way she did not want to examine too closely. The storm raged for 3 more days. 3 days in which Willa and Fletcher lived in their own small world, cut off from everything and everyone else. They talked for hours, sharing stories and dreams and fears. Fletcher told her about his childhood in Texas, about his mother who had died when he was young, about his father who had never recovered from the loss and drank himself to death before Fletcher left for the war. Willa told him about her parents, about the loneliness of being raised by an aunt who loved her but never quite understood her, about her determination to make her own way in the world. They played cards and checkers. They took turns reading aloud from a battered copy of Shakespeare's sonnets that someone had left in the cabin. Fletcher's deep voice stumbling over the unfamiliar poetry made Willa smile, and when she read, he listened with his eyes closed, looking peaceful and content. On the 3rd night, as they sat by the fire after supper, Fletcher suddenly said, "You know, when I found you in that snowdrift, I was terrified. I have seen people die from cold, and I thought for sure you were too far gone. Your lips were blue and you were not really conscious. I kept talking to you the whole ride here, begging you to stay with me, to keep breathing. I do not think I have ever been that scared in my life." Willa looked at him, surprised by the emotion in his voice. "You did not show it. You were so calm and competent. I thought you must deal with emergencies like that all the time." "I do, but usually it is cattle or horses I am trying to save, not people. Not beautiful young women who are supposed to be starting new lives, not ending them frozen in the snow." He met her eyes across the firelight. "I kept thinking about all the things you would never get to do if you died, all the children you would never teach, all the experiences you would never have. It seemed wrong, unfair. Thank you for not giving up on me. I could not have lived with myself if I had not tried." He paused, then added quietly, "And now, having gotten to know you these past few days, I am even more glad I found you. You are remarkable, Willa Thorne." Her breath caught. The way he said her name, the warmth in his eyes, made her heart beat faster. "I am not remarkable. I am just a school teacher. You are so much more than that. You are brave and kind and smart. You have a good heart. The children in White River are lucky to have you, Fletcher." She did not know what to say. The air between them felt charged, heavy with things unsaid. He stood abruptly. "I should check on the horse. Storm sounds like it might be letting up a bit." He grabbed his coat and went outside, leaving Willa sitting by the fire, her heart racing and her mind spinning. Did Fletcher have feelings for her? Or was she reading too much into his words, seeing what she wanted to see because she had developed feelings for him? When he came back in, stamping snow from his boots. He avoided her eyes. "Storm is definitely easing. I think it will blow over by morning. We should be able to leave the day after tomorrow once the trails are passable." "Oh," Willa tried to keep the disappointment out of her voice. "That is good news. Yes, you can finally get to White River and start your new job." They went to bed soon after, but Willa lay awake for a long time, listening to the wind and Fletcher's steady breathing from his bedroll by the fire. She did not want to leave. She wanted to stay here in this little cabin with Fletcher, cut off from the world, just the two of them. But that was impossible, of course. She had obligations, responsibilities. The school board was expecting her. Children needed her, and Fletcher had his own life, his work on the ranch. Whatever was growing between them, it was just a product of their forced proximity, their shared danger. Once they returned to the real world, it would fade like morning mist. She told herself that over and over, trying to make herself believe it. But her heart knew better. The next morning dawned clear and blindingly bright. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a world transformed. Snow lay in deep drifts everywhere, sparkling like diamonds in the sunlight. The sky was a brilliant blue, and the air was crisp and still. Fletcher opened the door and looked out, shading his eyes against the glare. "We will need to wait for the snow to settle a bit before we can travel safely. Tomorrow morning, I think. That will give time for the trails to be broken by wildlife and for the worst of the drifts to compress." So they had one more day. One more day in their private world before reality intruded. They spent it quietly. Fletcher went out and dug through the snow to create a path to the lean to where his horse was sheltered. He brought the animal around to the front of the cabin and spent time grooming it and checking its hooves, making sure it would be ready for the journey. Willa watched from the doorway, admiring the easy way Fletcher handled the large animal, the obvious affection between man and horse. "What is his name?" she called. "Brandy, because of his color." Fletcher patted the horse's neck. "He has been with me for 4 years now. Saved my life more than once. He is beautiful. He is a good horse, steady and smart. Those are the qualities that matter out here." In the afternoon, they took a walk around the cabin, staying close because the snow was so deep. Willa lifted her face to the sun, closing her eyes and breathing in the cold, clean air. She felt alive in a way she never had before, every sense heightened, every moment precious. "It is beautiful here," she said. "I never imagined the West would be like this." "It can be harsh," Fletcher said. "You have seen that firsthand. But yes, it is beautiful too. There is a freedom here that you do not find back east. Space to breathe, room to be yourself. I love it. I am starting to see why." They stood together in the snow, not touching but standing close, and Willa felt the pull between them like a physical thing. She wanted to reach out and take his hand, wanted to close the distance between them, but she did not quite dare. Fletcher cleared his throat. "Willa, I need to tell you something." Her heart jumped. "What is it?" "These past few days with you have been, I have never felt this way before, about anyone." He turned to face her fully, his expression serious and a little uncertain. "I know we have only known each other a short time, and I know you have your teaching position waiting, but I cannot let you leave without telling you that I have feelings for you. Strong feelings." Willa felt tears prick her eyes. "I have feelings for you too, Fletcher. I tried to tell myself it was just because of the circumstances, because you saved me, but it is more than that. I care about you." "Then stay." He took her hands in his grip warm and strong. "Do not go to White River. Stay with me. We can figure everything out, but please do not walk out of my life tomorrow." "I want to," she whispered. "You do not know how much I want to, but I cannot. The school board is expecting me. They have already paid for my travel expenses. Children are waiting for their teacher." I cannot just abandon my responsibilities. Come to White River with me then. Teach your school. I can visit you there. It is only 10 miles from the ranch. I can ride in on weekends and we can get to know each other properly without a blizzard forcing us together. His eyes searched hers. Give us a chance, Willa, please. Yes, she breathed. Yes, Fletcher, I want that. He pulled her into his arms then, and she went willingly, wrapping her arms around his waist and burying her face in his chest. He held her close, and she could hear his heart beating strong and steady beneath her ear. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the snow, while the sun shone down and the world around them sparkled with impossible beauty. That night, they sat by the fire talking late into the evening, making plans. Fletcher would take her to White River in the morning and explain to the school board what had happened. Then he would return to his ranch and resume his work. But he would come visit her the following weekend, and they would begin courting properly. I do not have much to offer you, Fletcher said quietly. I am just a ranch hand. I make decent wages, but I do not have land of my own or much saved up. But I am a hard worker, and I am honest, and I promise I will do everything in my power to make you happy. You have already made me happy, Willa said. These days with you have been the happiest of my life, strange as that sounds given that I nearly died. Not strange at all. I feel the same way. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. You are so beautiful. Have I told you that? She blushed. You mentioned it once, but I thought I might have dreamed it. It is true. You are beautiful inside and out. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. But she did not want to. She tilted her face up to his, and when his lips met hers, she felt something inside her come alive. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid of breaking something precious. But then Fletcher's hand came up to cup the back of her head, and Willa pressed closer, and the kiss deepened into something urgent and sweet and perfect. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Fletcher rested his forehead against hers. I will warm you back to life, he murmured. For as long as you will let me, I will spend every day making sure you never feel cold or alone or frightened again. Willa felt tears slide down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. I love you, Fletcher Lawson. I know it is too soon to say that, but I do. I love you. I love you too, Willa Thorne. From the moment I saw you in that snowdrift, I think my heart knew you were going to be important to me. They kissed again, and the fire crackled beside them, and outside the snow lay pristine and perfect under the stars. In the morning, they would return to the real world with all its complications and responsibilities. But for now, this moment was theirs alone. The journey to White River the next day was long and cold but uneventful. Brandy carried them both steadily through the snow, and Fletcher kept one arm around Willa's waist the entire way, just as he had when he first saved her. This time, though, it was not just about keeping her safe. It was about staying close, cherishing every moment they had together before they had to part. They reached White River in the late afternoon. It was indeed a small town, just as Fletcher had described, with one main street lined with buildings that looked rough and new. But there was a church with a white steeple and people on the street who waved as they rode past, and Willa felt a flutter of hope in her chest. Maybe she could make a home here. Maybe this could be her new beginning. Fletcher brought them to a neat white house near the church, which he said belonged to the head of the school board, a man named Harold Garrett. They dismounted, and Fletcher knocked on the door while Willa smoothed her rumpled dress and tried to look presentable. The door opened to reveal a middle-aged man with graying hair and kind eyes. His expression went from curious to concerned when he saw them. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Mr. Garrett. My name is Fletcher Lawson, and this is Miss Willa Thorne. She is your new school teacher." Harold Garrett's eyes widened. Miss Thorne, good heavens, we thought something terrible had happened to you. You were supposed to arrive 5 days ago. Come in, both of you. They were ushered into a warm, comfortable parlor, where a woman who was introduced as Mrs. Garrett fussed over Willa, bringing her tea and blankets and exclaiming over her ordeal. Fletcher explained what had happened, how he had found Willa in the blizzard and sheltered with her in the line shack until the storm passed. You saved her life, young man, Harold Garrett said, shaking Fletcher's hand vigorously. We are all in your debt. I just did what anyone would have done, Fletcher said, but his eyes found Willa's across the room, and they shared a secret smile. The Garretts insisted that Willa stay with them until she could get settled in the small cottage that had been prepared for her near the schoolhouse. They also insisted that Fletcher stay for supper and spend the night, since it would be dark soon and dangerous to ride back to the ranch. Over dinner, they discussed Willa's new position. She would start teaching the following week, giving her time to recover from her ordeal and to prepare her lessons. There were 15 children in the town ranging from 6 to 14 years old, all eager to learn. We are a small community, Harold Garrett explained, but we believe strongly in the power of education. Having a dedicated teacher is a blessing, Miss Thorne. The children have been so excited to meet you. I am excited to meet them too, Willa said sincerely. Teaching is my calling. I cannot wait to begin. After dinner, Fletcher asked if he might speak with Willa alone for a few minutes before he turned in for the night. The Garretts exchanged knowing looks but agreed, directing them to the front porch. Outside, under a sky full of stars, Fletcher took both of Willa's hands in his. I have to leave at first light tomorrow, he said, but I will come back this Saturday. That gives you a few days to settle in and start getting to know the town, and then we can spend some time together. I will count the hours, Willa said. I already miss you and you have not even left yet. I know the feeling. He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. You are going to be an amazing teacher, Willa. Those children are lucky to have you, and you are going to be an amazing. Well, whatever you end up being in my life, she smiled up at him. Everything happened so fast. A week ago I did not even know you existed. Sometimes the best things happen fast. My mother used to say that when something is right, you just know. No amount of time or logic can change that. He kissed her then, soft and lingering. I know this is right. You and me, I know it in my bones. So do I, Willa whispered against his lips. So do I. Saturday seemed to take forever to arrive. Willa spent the intervening days settling into her cottage, preparing lesson plans, and meeting the families whose children would be in her class. Everyone was kind and welcoming, and several women came by with pies and preserves and offers of friendship. The cottage was small but comfortable, with a bedroom, a sitting room, and a tiny kitchen. It was more space than Willa had ever had to herself, and she loved it immediately. The schoolhouse was a simple one-room building with rough wooden benches, a slate board, and a pot-bellied stove. It smelled of fresh wood and chalk dust, and when Willa stood at the front of the room imagining it full of children, she felt a swell of joy and purpose. But through it all, she thought of Fletcher. She replayed their conversations in her mind, remembered the feel of his arms around her, the taste of his kisses. She lay awake at night wondering if he was thinking of her too, if he was counting the days until Saturday as eagerly as she was. When Saturday finally came, Willa woke before dawn and spent an hour getting ready, trying on different dresses and fussing with her hair until she was satisfied. She was just putting on her coat to walk into town when she heard the sound of hoofbeats outside. She ran to the door and flung it open to find Fletcher dismounting from Brandy, looking travel-worn and wonderful. He turned and saw her, and his whole face lit up with a smile that made her heart skip. Willa. She ran to him, propriety be damned, and threw herself into his arms. He caught her and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around while she laughed with pure joy. "I missed you," she said when he set her down. "I missed you so much. I missed you too. I thought this week would never end." He cupped her face in his hands, studying her features like he was memorizing them. "You look beautiful. How has your week been?" "Good. Busy. I have met almost everyone in town and they have all been so kind, but it was not the same without you," she smiled. "Come inside. I made coffee, and I want to hear everything about your week." They spent the morning talking and laughing, catching up on everything that had happened in the 5 days since they had parted. Fletcher told her about returning to the ranch and facing the teasing of his fellow ranch hands who had guessed that something had happened between him and the schoolteacher during the storm. "They think I am sweet on you," he said with a grin. "And they are right. What did you tell them?" "The truth. That I found an amazing woman and I plan to court her properly and hopefully convince her to marry me someday." He said it casually, but there was an intensity in his eyes that made Willa's breath catch. "Marry you," she whispered. "Is that so surprising? I told you I love you, Willa. I meant it. I want a life with you, a real life. I want to come home to you every night and wake up beside you every morning. I want to build something together." Tears filled her eyes. "I want that too. But Fletcher, we have only known each other a week. People will think we are crazy." "Maybe we are." He pulled her onto his lap and she went willingly, resting her head on his shoulder. "But I do not care what people think. I know what I feel and I know what I want. If you need more time to be sure, I will give you all the time you need. I am not going anywhere." "I do not need more time," Willa said firmly. "I know what I want too. I want you." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Willa felt like she was melting into him, like they were becoming one person instead of two. When they finally broke apart, both flushed and breathing hard, Fletcher rested his forehead against hers. "I cannot afford a big wedding or a fancy house," he said quietly. "But I promise I will work hard and take care of you. You will never want for anything I can provide. I do not need big or fancy, I just need you." They spent the rest of the day together, walking through town hand in hand, talking with people, letting everyone see that they were courting. The news spread like wildfire, and by evening everyone in White River knew that their new schoolteacher and Fletcher Lawson from the Double Bar Ranch were in love. Some people thought it was too fast, too impulsive. But most saw the way Fletcher and Willa looked at each other and smiled, recognizing true love when they saw it. Harold Garrett pulled Fletcher aside at one point and said, "She is a special woman, Mr. Lawson. Take care of her." "With my life, sir," Fletcher replied solemnly. "I will protect her and cherish her for as long as I live." Over the next few months, Fletcher came to White River every weekend without fail. No matter how tired he was from the week's work, no matter the weather, he rode those 10 miles to see Willa. They took walks together, attended church services, had dinner with various families in town. They talked about everything under the sun, learning each other's quirks and dreams and fears. And every time Fletcher had to leave on Sunday evening, it got a little harder to say goodbye. Willa threw herself into teaching with passion and dedication. The children adored her, responding to her patience and creativity. She made learning fun, incorporating games and songs and hands-on projects. Parents reported that their children came home excited about school, eager to show off what they had learned. The school board was thrilled, and Willa felt fulfilled in a way she never had before. But as much as she loved teaching, she loved Fletcher more. She found herself living for weekends, counting down the days until she could see him again. She wrote him letters during the week, long, rambling letters about her students and her thoughts, and how much she missed him. He wrote back, his letters shorter but no less heartfelt, telling her about the ranch and the cattle and how he thought of her constantly. In May, 4 months after they met, Fletcher rode into White River on a Friday afternoon instead of Saturday morning. Willa was just dismissing her students when she heard Brandy's distinctive whinny outside. She looked through the window and saw Fletcher tying his horse to the hitching post, and her heart leapt. She dismissed the children quickly and ran outside, not caring who saw. Fletcher caught her in his arms and kissed her right there in front of the schoolhouse, in front of God and everyone. "What are you doing here a day early?" she asked when they came up for air. "Not that I am complaining. I could not wait another day. I had to see you." He took her hands, suddenly looking nervous. "Willa, I need to ask you something." Her heart started pounding. She knew what was coming. She could see it in his eyes, in the way his hands trembled slightly as they held hers. Fletcher dropped to one knee right there in the dirt, and Willa heard gasps from the children who had not quite left yet, from the women passing by on the street. But she did not care about any of them. Her whole world had narrowed down to the man kneeling before her. "Willa Thorne," Fletcher said, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you more than I knew it was possible to love another person. You are my best friend, my companion, my everything. I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy. Will you marry me?" He pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band with a small diamond that glittered in the afternoon sun. Willa knew it must have cost him months of wages, and the thought made her eyes fill with tears. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Fletcher, I will marry you. I love you so much." He stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed her again while the watching crowd burst into applause and cheers. Children jumped up and down with excitement, women dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs, and men clapped Fletcher on the back when he finally released Willa. That night, there was an impromptu celebration at the saloon, with dancing and music and toasts to the happy couple. Willa had never been in a saloon before, but the owner had cleared out a space and made it respectable for the occasion, and she found herself whirling around the floor in Fletcher's arms while everyone watched and smiled. "When should we get married?" Fletcher asked as they danced. "I want it to be soon. I am tired of leaving you every Sunday." "School ends in June," Willa said. "We could get married then. That gives us a month to plan." "A month," Fletcher groaned. "That feels like forever. It will go by quickly, and then we will have the rest of our lives together." They were married on the first Saturday in June, in the little church in White River. Willa wore a dress of pale blue silk that the women of the town had helped her sew, and Fletcher wore his Sunday best, looking handsome and nervous and incredibly happy. Harold Garrett walked Willa down the aisle since she had no father to do it, and when he placed her hand in Fletcher's, Willa felt tears of joy streaming down her face. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. They exchanged vows in front of the entire town, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. When the preacher told Fletcher he could kiss his bride, he did so tenderly, reverently, like Willa was the most precious thing in the world. The reception was held at the schoolhouse, which had been decorated with wildflowers and ribbons. There was food and cake and dancing, and Willa felt like she was floating on air. Every time she looked at Fletcher, now her husband, she felt overwhelmed with happiness. Fletcher had managed to save enough money to buy a small piece of land adjacent to the Double Bar Ranch. It was not much, just 40 acres, but it had a creek running through it and good grazing land. With the help of his ranch friends, he had spent the past month building a small house there, just 2 rooms but solid and weatherproof. "It is not fancy," he had told Willa when he showed her the property the week before the wedding, "but it is ours. We can add on as we need to, as we have children and as I save more money." "It is perfect," Willa had breathed, imagining their life there together. "It is everything I could want." After the reception, Fletcher lifted Willa onto Brandy and climbed up behind her, and they rode out to their new home amid cheers and well wishes. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and Willa leaned back against her husband's chest, feeling utterly content. "Happy, Mrs. Lawson," Fletcher murmured in her ear. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," she replied. "Thank you for finding me in the snow that day. Thank you for warming me back to life. Thank you for letting me," he said softly. "You saved me too, you know. I was just going through the motions before I met you, working and existing but not really living. You brought color back into my world." When they reached the little house, Fletcher dismounted and lifted Willa down, but instead of setting her on her feet, he carried her to the door and across the threshold. Inside, everything was neat and clean, with a fire already burning in the fireplace and wildflowers in a jar on the table. Someone, probably Fletcher's friends from the ranch, had been there ahead of them to make things ready. Fletcher set Willa on her feet and cupped her face in his hands. "I love you," he said simply. "I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "I love you too," Willa replied. "My cowboy who saved me from the snow." That night, they became husband and wife in every sense, and Willa discovered that being with Fletcher was even more wonderful than she had imagined. He was gentle and passionate, attentive to her needs, and when she fell asleep in his arms hours later, she felt complete in a way she never had before. Life settled into a happy routine. Willa continued teaching, though the school board agreed to let her finish the school year and then take a break. Fletcher wanted her to focus on settling into their new home, and Willa was ready for a rest after a year of teaching. They talked about her returning to the schoolhouse eventually, but for now, she was content to be a rancher's wife. Fletcher continued working at the double bar, but he also began building his own herd on their 40 acres. He was saving money carefully, planning for the future. He talked about eventually having enough cattle to support them on their own without needing to work for someone else. Willa kept house, cooked meals, tended a garden, and discovered that she loved the quiet life of a ranch wife. She read books in the afternoon sunshine, wrote letters to her aunt in Boston describing her new life, and counted the minutes until Fletcher came home each evening. In the fall, Willa realized she was pregnant. She told Fletcher one evening over dinner, watching his face carefully to gauge his reaction. He stared at her for a long moment, then let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Willa asked, though she could see the answer in his shining eyes. "Happy, Willa, I am over the moon, a child, our child." He knelt down and pressed his ear to her still flat stomach as if he could hear the baby already. "Hello in there, little one, this is your father. I am going to love you so much." Willa ran her fingers through his hair, feeling her own eyes fill with tears. "You are going to be such a good father. I am going to try. I am going to give our children everything I never had. A stable home, 2 parents who love them, a future full of possibilities." The pregnancy was not easy. Willa suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and Fletcher hovered over her anxiously, bringing her crackers and ginger tea and anything else that might help. As her belly grew, she found it harder to move around, and Fletcher took over more and more of the household chores, insisting that she rest. In May, almost exactly a year after they got married, Willa went into labor. Fletcher rode frantically to White River to fetch the doctor and Mrs. Garrett, who was acting as midwife. The labor lasted 18 hours, long and difficult, and Fletcher paced outside the bedroom door the entire time, his face white with fear every time he heard Willa cry out. But finally, in the early morning hours, a baby's cry filled the little house. Fletcher burst through the door to find Mrs. Garrett holding a tiny, red-faced infant wrapped in a blanket. "You have a son," she announced with a smile. "A healthy boy." Fletcher went to Willa, who was lying exhausted in the bed, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. But she was smiling, and when he took her hand, she squeezed weakly. "We have a son," she whispered. "Fletcher, we have a son." "You did so well," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I am so proud of you. Can I hold him?" Mrs. Garrett placed the baby in Fletcher's arms, and he stared down at the tiny face in wonder. The baby had stopped crying and was looking up at his father with dark blue eyes. "Hello, son," Fletcher said softly. "I am your papa, and I am going to do everything I can to make sure you have a good life. I promise." They named him Thomas William Lawson, after Fletcher's father and Willa's father. Tom, they called him. He was a good baby, sleeping reasonably well and nursing eagerly. Willa recovered from the birth slowly, and Fletcher took time off from the ranch to care for both her and the baby, refusing to leave them alone. "I can manage," Willa protested weakly when Fletcher insisted on doing all the cooking and cleaning. "You just brought our son into the world," Fletcher said firmly. "You rest and heal. Let me take care of you for once." As Tom grew, Fletcher proved to be just as devoted a father as Willa had known he would be. He would come home from long days working cattle and immediately reach for the baby, talking to him softly, playing with his tiny fingers and toes. When Tom woke crying in the night, Fletcher was often the first one up, rocking the baby and singing lullabies in his rumbling voice until Tom fell back asleep. 2 years later, their second child was born, a daughter they named Sarah Rose. Unlike Tom's difficult birth, Sarah came quickly and easily, arriving before the doctor could even make it from White River. Fletcher ended up delivering his own daughter with Mrs. Garrett coaching him through it, and the experience bonded him to Sarah in a special way. Life was full and busy with 2 small children, but Willa had never been happier. Their little house seemed to overflow with love and laughter. Fletcher had expanded it, adding 2 more rooms so the children could each have their own space. Their herd had grown too, enough that Fletcher was able to quit his job at the Double Bar and work their own land full-time. Money was sometimes tight, but they always had enough. Fletcher was a skilled cattleman, and their herd thrived under his care. Willa sometimes took in sewing or helped tutor children from town for extra money. But mostly she focused on raising Tom and Sarah, on making their house a home. The children adored their father. Tom followed Fletcher everywhere once he was old enough to walk, toddling after him to the barn and the pastures, trying to help with chores in his clumsy toddler way. Sarah was a daddy's girl from the start, lighting up whenever Fletcher walked in the room, reaching for him with her chubby arms. "You are so good with them," Willa said one evening, watching Fletcher play with both children on the floor. Tom was building a tower out of blocks while Sarah chewed on a stuffed rabbit, both of them giggling at their father's antics. "They make it easy," Fletcher said, grinning as Tom's tower collapsed and the boy squealed with delight. "They are good kids. We are lucky. We are blessed," Willa corrected. "I never imagined my life could be this full. When I was on that train from Boston, heading west to teach school, I thought I knew what my future held. A career, maybe eventually a respectable marriage to some banker or clerk. But this, a ranch, children, a husband I love more than life itself. I never dreamed it could be like this." Fletcher got up and came to her, pulling her into his arms while the children played at their feet. "I thank God every day that I found you in that snow," he said quietly. "You changed everything for me, Willa. Before you, I was just drifting, going from job to job with no real purpose. You gave me a reason to build something, to plan for the future. You gave me a family." She kissed him softly. "And you kept your promise. You warmed me back to life, not just that night in the blizzard, but every day since. You make me feel alive and loved and cherished." As the years passed, Fletcher and Willa's love only grew stronger. They faced challenges together: droughts that killed their grass, harsh winters that claimed some of their cattle, illnesses that struck the children and left Willa pacing the floor with worry until they recovered. But they faced everything together, and their partnership deepened with each trial they overcame. They had 2 more children, another son named James and a daughter named Emma. Their house expanded again to accommodate the growing family, and Fletcher built a new barn that was the pride of the county. Their herd grew to over 100 head, and they became known throughout the region for the quality of their cattle. Tom grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved reading and learning as much as he loved working with the animals. Sarah was spirited and adventurous, always getting into some kind of mischief. James was quiet and artistic, spending hours drawing pictures of the ranch and the animals. Emma was the baby, sweet and gentle, loved and spoiled by everyone. Willa eventually returned to teaching, holding classes in the parlor of their house for children from neighboring ranches who were too far from town to attend the schoolhouse. She loved sharing her passion for learning with a new generation, and the children thrived under her instruction. Fletcher became a respected member of the community, known for his honesty and hard work. He was elected to the school board, served on various committees, and was always the first to help a neighbor in need. He never forgot what it was like to struggle, to be alone and uncertain, and he made sure to extend kindness to anyone who needed it. One winter evening, 20 years after Fletcher had found Willa in the snow, they sat together on the porch of their now substantial house, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. The children were inside, the older ones helping the younger ones with homework, their voices drifting out through the window in a comforting murmur. "You remember," Willa said softly, "that night in the line shack when you first told me you loved me?" Fletcher smiled. "Of course I do. I remember everything about those days. I was so scared you were going to die before I could get you to safety. And then I was scared you would leave and I would never see you again. I have never been so terrified in my life. You hid it well. You seemed so calm and capable. I was falling apart inside, but I knew I had to be strong for you." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. 20 years, Willa. 20 years of marriage, 4 children, a successful ranch. Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life. Sometimes I cannot either. I look at you and I still see that cowboy who pulled me out of the snow, who promised to warm me back to life. You have kept that promise every single day." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you more now than I did then, if that is even possible." "It is possible," Fletcher said. "Because I feel the same way. Every year with you is better than the last. Every day I wake up grateful that you are mine." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to deep purple. Behind them, their children laughed, the sound of their voices like music. Around them, the land they had worked so hard to build lay peaceful and productive. And between them, the love that had started in a blizzard burned steady and strong, a warmth that would last them through all the winters to come. Tom, now 19, came out onto the porch. He was tall like his father, with Willa's dark hair and Fletcher's blue-gray eyes. "Papa, one of the cows in the east pasture is showing signs of calving. Do you want me to go check on her?" Fletcher stood, squeezing Willa's shoulder as he did. "I will come with you." 2 pairs of eyes are better than one. As father and son walked off toward the barn, Willa heard Tom ask, "Papa, how did you know Mama was the one? How did you know you wanted to marry her?" Fletcher's answer drifted back to her on the evening breeze. "The moment I saw her, son, even though she was half frozen and unconscious, I knew. Something in my heart recognized her, and every moment since then has just confirmed what I knew that first day. When you find the right person, you do not have to wonder. You just know." Willa smiled, wiping away a happy tear. She thought back to that terrified girl in the snow, certain she was going to die alone and cold. That girl could never have imagined the life that awaited her, the love and family and joy that would come from that terrible day. Sarah came out and sat beside her mother, followed by the younger children. At 16, Sarah was beautiful and spirited, already attracting attention from the young men in the county, though none of them quite met her standards yet. "Tell us again about how you and Papa met," Emma begged. At 10 years old, she loved romantic stories. Willa gathered her youngest onto her lap while Sarah and 14-year-old James settled on the porch steps. She told them the story she had told 100 times before, about the blizzard and the desperate walk through the snow, about the cowboy who appeared out of nowhere and saved her life, about falling in love in a tiny cabin while a storm raged outside. The children listened, rapt, even though they knew every word. It was their favorite story, the legend of how their parents met, and they never tired of hearing it. "And then what happened?" Emma prompted when Willa paused. "Then your papa brought me to White River and we courted properly and he proposed and we got married and built this ranch and had all of you. And we lived happily ever after." "Is it really happily ever after?" James asked seriously. "I mean, there have been hard times, right?" "Not everything has been perfect." "No, not perfect," Willa agreed. "We have had struggles and sorrows like everyone does. But yes, happily ever after. Because we face everything together and because the love we have is strong enough to carry us through anything. That is what makes it a happy ending, not the absence of problems, but having the right person beside you when problems come." Fletcher and Tom returned from checking on the cow, reporting that she was fine and would probably calve in the morning. The family went inside for dinner, gathering around the big table that Fletcher had built with his own hands. As they ate and talked and laughed together, Willa looked around at the faces of the people she loved most in the world and felt her heart overflow. This was what she had been saved for, that day in the snow. Not just to survive, but to live fully and love deeply and build something beautiful with the man who had promised to warm her back to life. And every day, for the rest of their days together, Fletcher kept that promise. Through all the seasons of their life, through spring planting and summer heat, through autumn harvest and winter cold, their love remained constant, a fire that never went out, a warmth that sustained them both. Years later, when they were old and gray, sitting together on that same porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard, Fletcher would take Willa's hand and say, "Best thing I ever did was ride out in that blizzard." And Willa would smile and reply, "Best thing I ever did was come west on that train." Because from that one moment of terror and cold had come a lifetime of warmth and love. From near death had come abundant life. And from a chance encounter in a snowstorm had come a love story for the ages, one that their children and grandchildren would tell for generations to come. The story of the schoolteacher who was frozen with fear in the snow, and the cowboy who warmed her back to life, and how they built a life together that was richer and fuller than either of them had ever dreamed possible. A life filled with love and laughter, with children and cattle, with hard work and deep satisfaction. A life that proved that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the very best outcomes, and that true love can bloom even in the coldest winter. And so they lived, Fletcher and Willa Lawson, on their ranch in South Dakota, surrounded by family and friends, their love a beacon that shone bright through all their years together. From that first moment when he pulled her from the snow until their last days together decades later, they never forgot the gift they had been given each other. And they spent every day making sure the other knew how precious that gift was, how grateful they were, how deep and lasting their love remained. In the end, it was a simple story. A man saved a woman's life. They fell in love. They built a life together. But in its simplicity was profound truth. That love can bloom in the most unlikely circumstances, that kindness can change everything, and that the warmest fires are built not just to survive the cold, but to create a light that will guide generations to come.